That night, I walked over to my husband's side of the bed. He had fallen asleep while scrolling through vacation packages on his phone. The device had slipped from his hand and the screen was unlocked. I leaned over simply to turn it off, but what I saw on the screen made my knees go weak. Allison shouldered the apartment door open, balancing a heavy grocery bag in one arm and a small paper bag from CVS in the other. Her keys slipped from her fingers, clattering onto the floor. She cursed under her breath as she picked them up. Her feet were throbbing. After a grueling 10-hour shift in the ER, things at the hospital had been pure chaos. 2 multi-car pileups on the Eisenhower, a middle-aged man having a heart attack right in the waiting room, and an endless stream of people with the common cold who, for some reason, decided the emergency room was the place to treat a runny nose. She kicked her shoes off right by the entrance, not bothering to put them in the closet, and walked into the kitchen, her bare feet cool against the laminate flooring. A mountain of dirty dishes towered in the sink, 3 plates, a couple of mugs, and a skillet with the dried-on remnants of scrambled eggs. Ethan had clearly been home all day, but couldn't be bothered with the most basic cleanup. "Ethan, you home?" she called out, setting the bags on the counter. A non-committal grunt, somewhere between a yeah and an uh-huh, came from the living room. Allison sighed and began unpacking the groceries. Milk into the fridge, check the expiration date, since last time she'd bought one that was already sour. Bread in the bread box, vegetables, tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers into the crisper drawer. Her hands moved on autopilot, a series of practiced motions, while her mind was already far away, on the shore of a warm ocean, where she could lie on the sand, listen to the waves, and think about nothing. Not about hospital shifts, not about bills, not about the home renovation that was still dragging on. This year had been brutal. First, they transferred her to a different department without even asking if she wanted it. They just presented it as a fact. Starting Monday, you're in the ER. She had to get used to a new team, a new charge nurse who nitpicked every little thing, and a new rhythm of work. Here, patients didn't rest in wards. They came in a constant, overwhelming flood, one after another, and you had to think fast: who goes to trauma, who needs an X-ray, and who just needs to be calmed down and sent home. Then her mom got sick. Nothing life-threatening. The doctors said it was age-related blood pressure spikes, a little heart trouble, but Allison worried constantly. Every weekend, she drove 2 hours out of the city to the 2-story house she grew up in. She helped with chores, cooked meals, and took her mom to appointments at the regional clinic, where they'd often wait for 3 hours just to be seen. Her father had passed away 5 years ago, and she had no siblings, so there was no one else to help. It was all on her. And then there was the condo renovation, the damned, endless renovation that had stretched into 6 months instead of the promised 2. The contractors came and went on some inscrutable schedule, leaving behind dust, unfinished corners, and unpainted walls. One day they ran out of cement. The next, the wrong tile was delivered. Then the foreman got sick. Ethan had promised to oversee the process, but in reality, every time Allison came home from work and asked what got done, he'd reply, "I don't know, I didn't check, I was on a call." Ethan was a remote software developer. He sat at home, in front of his monitor, headphones on. Allison often found him in that exact position, even when she came home late and exhausted. He'd be in the same posture, staring at the screen, fingers flying across the keyboard. He used to meet her at the door. He would hug her, kiss the top of her head, and ask about her day as he led her to the kitchen, where dinner would already be waiting. It might have been a simple meal, but he made an effort. Now, at best, he'd nod without looking up from his screen and mumble, "Hey, almost done." She poured herself a glass of water from the Brita pitcher cold, stinging her throat, and leaned against the countertop, feeling the exhaustion wash over her in waves, settling on her shoulders, her back, her legs. In the reflection on the stainless steel refrigerator door, she caught a glimpse of her face. Pale, with dark circles under her eyes, a stray strand of hair escaping from her ponytail. When was the last time she'd really looked in a mirror, not in a rush? When was the last time she'd put on makeup just for herself, not for work? "Ethan," she called out louder, walking toward the living room. He was sitting on the couch, engrossed in his phone. The screen cast a cold, bluish light on his face, making him look alien, almost waxy. His hair was messy and stubble dotted his chin. He'd stopped shaving every day, saying it didn't matter since he never went anywhere. He was wearing an old t-shirt with a stretched-out collar that Allison had meant to throw away several times. On the coffee table sat a mug with the dregs of cold coffee and a scattering of cookie crumbs that no one had bothered to clean up. "Did you hear me come in?" Allison sank onto the other end of the couch, pulling off her socks. Her feet ached. They would definitely be swollen tomorrow. Ethan didn't look up. His thumb was lazily scrolling up and down, browsing some feed, reading, texting. Allison couldn't see what, and she didn't ask. She used to ask. She used to be interested. Now, she just didn't have the energy. "How was your day?" "Fine." "Had calls. Always deadlines. I'm almost done." Allison reached for the remote and turned on the TV, just to fill the silence. The evening news flashed across the screen. An anchor in a sharp suit was talking about some political development, then it switched to the weather forecast. Allison wasn't listening. She just watched the anchor's lips move and thought about how nice it would be to be somewhere far away, by the sea. In a hotel with crisp white sheets, breakfast on a terrace overlooking turquoise water, to wake up not to an alarm, but to the sound of seagulls, to walk to the beach without thinking that in an hour she had to rush to work. "Hey!" She turned to her husband, trying to keep her voice light, free of accusation. "Let's finally decide on our vacation. It's already May. If we don't book now, we'll be left with scraps. All the good resorts will be taken." Ethan finally tore his eyes away from his phone, and Allison caught a flash of irritation in his gaze, a shadow that passed through his eyes as quickly as it appeared. But he smoothed it over instantly, nodding with feigned interest. "Yeah, okay. You have anything specific in mind?" "I want the ocean. Warm, clear water." She closed her eyes, picturing the sound of the waves, the smell of salt, the feeling of sand beneath her feet. Somewhere we can just lie on the beach and not think about anything. Maybe Mexico? The Caribbean? I don't know. I honestly don't care. The important thing is just to get away. I need this vacation so badly, you have no idea. I feel like if I work another month like this without a break, I'm just going to snap. Ethan gave her a long, appraising look she couldn't decipher. "Got it. I'll look at some options. I'll start checking tomorrow." "No. Let's at least start looking tonight." Allison scooted closer, feeling the warmth of his body. "Can I look on your phone?" "Mine's dead." Ethan flinched a sharp, instinctive movement, clutching the phone to his chest. It was too quick, too defensive. "Why? You have your own." "I just said, it's dead. And I'm too lazy to get up for the charger." "Ethan, just for a second." She reached out her hand, but he was already getting off the couch. "Look, let me handle it. Seriously." He took a step back, still gripping his phone. "You're tired. Go relax. I'll pick a few options, show you tomorrow, and we'll decide. Sound good?" There was a hurried, nervous note in his voice that he tried to hide behind a veneer of concern. But Allison was too drained to attach any meaning to it, too tired to start an argument over why her husband wouldn't let her use his phone for a minute. Maybe he really did have an important work chat open. She nodded and leaned back against the sofa cushions. "Okay. Just please, pick something nice. Don't cheap out. I'm willing to spend the money, as long as it's comfortable, as long as we can just relax." Ethan was already walking toward the bedroom, his pace quick, almost like he was escaping. "I'm going to do a little more work and look at packages at the same time." The door closed behind him, leaving Allison alone in front of the TV. The weather forecast was on. They were predicting rain for the next week, with daytime temperatures in the high 50s. The meteorologist smiled, pointing to a map where storm clouds and raindrops hovered over the city. Allison reached for the throw blanket on the arm of the couch and wrapped it around herself. The apartment felt chilly. They had turned the heat off in mid-April, and true spring warmth was still a long way off. At night, she felt cold even under the comforter. For the past few months, their life had become a strange machine, running on inertia. They existed alongside each other, but not together. In the morning, Allison would leave for work. She got up at 6 a.m., got ready quickly, and drank her coffee standing in the kitchen because there was no time to sit. Ethan would stay home at his computer, sometimes not even waking up by the time she left. In the evening, she'd return, exhausted. He'd still be at his computer, or would have migrated to the couch with his phone. They ate dinner in silence, each staring at their own screen. Conversations were reduced to household logistics: what to buy, who to call, when the plumbers were coming to fix the pipe that had been leaking for 3 weeks. It used to be different. Allison remembered how different it was. 3 years ago, when they had just gotten married, Ethan would meet her after work with flowers. Not for holidays, just because. Because he was passing a Jewel Osco and thought it would make her happy. Daisies, roses, tulips, whatever he found. She'd come home to find him standing at the door with a bouquet and a smile that made her heart flip. He would cook dinner. True, it wasn't always edible. One time he tried to make beef Wellington and used the wrong kind of pastry, resulting in a soggy mess they laughed about until they cried. But he tried. He would put on music, set the table, light candles if there was a special occasion. And if there wasn't one, he'd invent one. It's been exactly 2 months since we went to that park, remember? Let's celebrate. They would take walks in the evening, holding hands. They went to the movies, picking films at random, sometimes ending up with total garbage, but it didn't matter. What mattered was just being together. They made plans: buy a lake house in Michigan where they could grow tomatoes and have barbecues on weekends. Get a dog, a golden retriever or a lab, big and friendly. Take a trip to Italy, wander the narrow streets of Rome, and try real pasta in some tiny trattoria. Italy remained just a plan. They didn't buy the lake house. All their money went into renovating this godforsaken condo. They didn't get the dog either. Ethan said he wasn't ready for that kind of responsibility, that a dog needed to be walked 3 times a day, and he had deadlines, and she had her job. Allison had agreed, really. When she was gone for 12 hours a day, who would walk the dog? She tried to remember the last time they'd made love. A month ago? 2? Longer? The date was a blur in her memory because the act itself had felt perfunctory, quick, lacking the intimacy they once shared. Ethan always used the excuse of being tired, or that he had a deadline, or an important call early the next morning, or a headache. Allison never pushed. She herself had no energy after her shifts. She would just collapse into bed and fall into a dead sleep, sometimes without even fully undressing. Maybe that's why she was clinging so tightly to the idea of a vacation. It seemed to her that if they could just break out of this routine, be in a different place, under a different sky, away from work and renovations and all this domestic grime, then everything would fix itself. They would become themselves again, the people they were 3 years ago. They would laugh, talk until morning, look into each other's eyes, and see something other than exhaustion. She believed in it. She wanted to believe. Allison stood up and went to the kitchen, trying not to think about the fact that her faith was starting to crack at the seams. She had to make something for dinner, though she had no appetite. There was a lump in her throat. But she had to, otherwise Ethan would just order pizza or burgers again, and they were already eating fast food half the time because she was too tired to cook. She opened the fridge and stared at the shelves, trying to figure out what she could throw together. Chicken, bought 2 days ago. Still good. Tomatoes, peppers, onions. There was pasta in the pantry. It could be some kind of bake, or just chicken with vegetables. Quick and filling. While she worked at the stove, chopping vegetables, prepping the chicken, and mixing spices, her thoughts kept circling back to the vacation, the ocean, the sand, cocktails at sunset. She had never tried one of those bright, umbrella-top drinks they serve at beach bars, but she wanted to. She and Ethan, walking along the shore, their footprints washed away by the waves. A romantic picture, like something out of a travel agency ad or a movie about a happy couple. It was silly, of course, to believe in such fairy tales at her age. She was 32. A grown woman, a nurse who had seen everything in the hospital: death, pain, human suffering. But didn't adults have the right to dream? Wasn't it okay, for just a week, 10 days, to forget everything and pretend that life was more than an endless grind? She coated the chicken in a sauce of sour cream, garlic, and a bit of mustard, put the dish in the oven, and set a timer for 25 minutes. Time for a shower while it cooked. to wash away the smell of the hospital, of antiseptic and sweat. In the bathroom, Allison undressed, tossing her scrubs into the laundry hamper. The pile was getting high. She'd have to do laundry on her day off. She looked at herself in the mirror. Her body had changed over the years, not drastically but noticeably. Her hips were wider. Her stomach wasn't as flat as it was at 25. A couple of stretch marks had appeared on her breasts, thin, white lines that hadn't bothered her before, but now she noticed them every time. She ran a hand over her skin, feeling a familiar self-consciousness. Ethan had stopped complimenting her long ago. He used to say she was beautiful, sexy, that she had great legs and incredible curves. Now, he was just silent. Even when she came out of the shower, he wouldn't look up from his phone. The hot water washed away the fatigue, but not the anxiety. Allison stood under the spray as thoughts she tried to ignore during the day bubbled to the surface. What if he's fallen out of love with me? What if he's met someone else? No, that's ridiculous. He's home all the time. Where would he meet someone? It was all remote work, conference calls, coding. Maybe he was just tired, or depressed. She'd read that developers often suffer from burnout. Maybe he needed to see a therapist, but he would never go. He'd say it was nonsense, that he could handle it himself. She scrubbed her skin red with a coarse towel and pulled on sweatpants and a soft t-shirt. The delicious smell of roasted chicken and garlic wafted from the kitchen. Her stomach growled with hunger. She realized she hadn't eaten anything since that sandwich she'd scarfed down between patients at lunch. Allison set the table, plated the food, sliced some bread, and made a quick salad with the cucumbers and tomatoes. Everything as usual, everything as always. "Ethan, dinner's ready," she called toward his room. Silence. Then, shuffling footsteps. He emerged 3 minutes later, still holding his phone, screen glowing. He typed out one last message before finally sitting down at the table. "Smells good," he mumbled, finally putting the phone in his pocket. They ate in silence. Allison tried to find a topic of conversation, but every phrase that came to mind seemed forced and empty. How are things? What's new at work? The answers were predictable. Fine. Okay. Nothing much. She chewed the chicken, which suddenly seemed tasteless, and stared at her plate. "Did you look at anything for the vacation yet?" she finally asked, trying to keep her tone light. "Yeah, glanced at a few things," Ethan said, taking a sip of water. "There are some deals for Cancun, pretty cheap, or Jamaica, but that's a bit more expensive. What about the resorts? Stars? Amenities? Is there a pool? We can look at the details tomorrow, okay?" He rubbed the bridge of his nose. "My brain is fried right now. I'm tired." Allison wanted to insist, to say that they had been putting this off for 3 weeks, that they needed to decide, that time was running out. But she held back. No point in ruining the evening by nagging. She nodded and continued eating. After dinner, Ethan said he had more work to do, a project to finish for a demo tomorrow, and disappeared back into his room. Allison cleared the table, washed the dishes, and wiped down the counters, all on autopilot. She made herself a cup of chamomile tea, hoping it would help her sleep, and sat on the couch. Some medical drama was on TV. She didn't follow the plot, just stared at the screen, hugging the warm mug. The actors played doctors who saved lives while navigating their dramatic personal problems. It was all so clean, so polished, with perfect lighting and a moving score. In reality, it was messier, more boring, with no music and no flattering close-ups. She picked up her own phone and opened the Expedia app. She scrolled through the deals: Mexico, Dominican Republic, Jamaica, 5-star hotels with photos of pools where the water was an impossibly turquoise color. 3-star places, simpler but still decent. The prices were steep, anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000 for a week for two, depending on the resort and the season. But she had savings. She had been putting a little away every month for just such an occasion. About $25,000 was sitting in her savings account, her emergency fund. Ethan made less, around $4,000 a month, maybe $5,000 if he took on freelance projects. She never held it against him, never mentioned that she earned more, that she covered most of their major expenses. She just did it. Utilities and HOA fees were $500 a month. Groceries, another $800. The renovation. She was afraid to even calculate how much that had cost, probably close to $30,000. He chipped in sometimes, but irregularly. He might give her $200 for groceries one month, then forget the next. She never reminded him. She didn't want to seem materialistic. Allison bookmarked a few resorts and saved the links in her notes. She'd show them to Ethan tomorrow, let him choose. Or she'd just choose herself. What difference did it make? The main thing was to get away, to have a change of scenery, to break out of this vicious cycle. Work, home, home. Maybe there, by the ocean, under the southern sun, they would once again become the people they used to be. In love, close, happy. She finished her cold tea and went to bed. In the bedroom, Ethan was already under the covers, turned toward the wall. His breathing was even and steady. Asleep, or pretending to be. Allison lay down beside him, trying not to make a sound. She reached out to hug him, her hand resting on his shoulder. She moved closer, but he mumbled something incoherent in his sleep and pulled away, shifting to the very edge of the bed. She retreated to her side and closed her eyes. Between them was an empty space, cold as a chasm. Sleep didn't come easily. Allison lay in the darkness, listening to her husband's steady breathing, and pictured the ocean, warm, gentle, endless. The waves rolling onto the shore, hissing on the sand, carrying away all the filth, all the worries. She would walk into the water up to her knees, the water warm as milk, then up to her waist. Then she would dive in head first, and it would wash everything away. The fatigue, the loneliness, this strange emptiness that had settled between them and was spreading like mold. Finally, she drifted off and dreamed of the sea, blue, calm, and deserted. She was walking alone along the shore, and the waves were washing away her footprints behind her. Allison opened her eyes in complete darkness. For a second, she lay still, trying to figure out what had woken her. The room was quiet, except for the sound of tree branches rustling outside. The wind was picking up, promising rain by morning. She turned her head and looked at the glowing numbers on the alarm clock. 3:47 a.m. Too early to get up, too late to be the middle of the night. Beside her, Ethan was breathing softly. He was lying on his back, arms spread out, and in his right hand, he still clutched his phone. The screen was dimly lit, casting flickering reflections on the ceiling. Allison propped herself up on her elbow and looked at her husband. He was fast asleep, his mouth slightly open, his breathing deep and even. She carefully reached for the phone to take it and place it on the nightstand. He often fell asleep with it, then complained in the morning about his fingers being numb. Allison gently uncurled his hand. The phone came loose easily. She took it, intending to simply turn off the screen and set it aside. But the screen didn't go dark. Instead, it unlocked at her touch. The travel booking app was open. Allison was about to close it, but something made her pause. She squinted, trying to read the small text on the screen. Booking confirmation. Cancun, Mexico. Departure in 2 weeks. So, he had chosen after all. He'd kept his promise. She smiled and swiped her finger across the screen to see the details, and her smile froze. The booking was for 6 people. Allison read the line again. Then a third time. 6 adults. The names Ethan Parker, Sharon Parker, that was his mother, Mark Parker, his brother, Linda Parker, his sister-in-law. Then there were 2 names she didn't know, Valerie Cole and Mike Johnson. Her name wasn't on the list. Allison Parker was nowhere to be found. Allison felt everything inside her clench into a tight, painful knot. Her hands started to tremble. She sat up in bed, bringing the phone closer to her face to make sure she wasn't mistaken. Maybe it was a draft. Maybe he was just looking at options for a big group. But at the bottom of the screen, a button glowed. Paid. Confirmation sent to email. Paid. He had paid for a trip for 6 people, for his family, for some woman named Valerie, but not for her. Her heart was pounding in her throat, making it hard to breathe. With a trembling finger, she swiped through his open apps, his email. There it was, a message from the travel agency with the booking confirmation. She opened it, looked at the attachment. Scans of their passports, 6 passports. Ethan, his mother, his brother, his sister-in-law. Mike Johnson, she didn't know him. and Valerie Cole, 24 years old. The passport photo showed a young woman with long blonde hair and full lips, beautiful, much younger than Allison. Her fingers moved on their own, opening his messaging app. The most recent chat, Valerie. She opened the conversation. The first message was from last night, after Allison had gone to sleep. Ethan, it's all booked, babe. We fly out on the 15th. Get ready for the best vacation of your life. Valerie, I can't wait. Are you sure everything will be okay? What if she suspects something? Ethan, don't worry. She has no idea. I told her we were going, just the two of us. She didn't even ask for details. Valerie, she's definitely not coming? Ethan, no, I booked it without her. I'll just tell her I mixed up the dates and they don't line up with her time off. She'll believe it. She always does. Allison scrolled up, reading messages from the past few weeks. Every line stabbed at her like a shard of glass. Ethan, I'll introduce you to my family. Mom's going to love you. She's been saying for ages that Allison isn't right for me. Valerie, you're really going to divorce her? Ethan, as soon as I get the money for this trip out of her, I'm filing the papers. No point in dragging it out. The condo is in her name, but I'll find a way. I can sue for a share of the equity we built. Valerie, I'm a little scared. What if you change your mind? Ethan, I won't. I've been over her for a long time. She's always tired, always complaining. With you, I feel alive. The phone slipped from her hands and landed softly on the comforter. Allison sat motionless, staring into the darkness. There was a roaring in her ears. The walls of the room seemed to be closing in, pressing down on her from all sides. She wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Beside her, Ethan snorted and turned onto his side. His hand slid across the sheet, searching for his phone. Allison grabbed it first, clutching it in her palm, terrified he would wake up. But Ethan just mumbled something in his sleep and grew quiet. She carefully got out of bed, holding the phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. On stiff legs, she made her way to the door, slipped out into the hallway, and gently closed it behind her. The apartment was cold and dark, with only the faint glow of a streetlight filtering through the window. Allison walked to the kitchen and sank onto a chair. She placed the phone on the table and stared at it as if it were a snake. Something hot and terrible churned inside her, betrayal, rage, pain, all mixed together. She pressed her palms to her face, trying to hold back the tears, but she couldn't. They streamed down, hot and bitter, dripping from her cheeks onto the table. How long? How long had this been going on? How many times had he lied to her face, hugged her, kissed her, said I love you, all while texting this Valerie, planning a vacation without her, planning a new life without her? She remembered giving him money for the renovation, for some urgent expenses, for a new laptop he supposedly needed for work. How much was it? Tens of thousands. More. She hadn't kept track, hadn't begrudged him a cent. They were a family. He was the man she loved. She trusted him. God, how she had trusted him. Allison wiped her face and picked up the phone again. She scrolled further back in the chat history. Messages from a month ago. 2, 3. They had met back in the winter, in some online gaming chat. Ethan played at night after she fell asleep from her shifts. Valerie turned out to be from the same city. They met up in March. Since then, they had been seeing each other regularly while Allison was at work. There were pictures in the chat. Valerie at a cafe, Valerie in his car, Valerie in a park. In one photo, they were kissing. Ethan had his arm around her waist, and he was smiling. A real, wide smile, the kind Allison hadn't seen in a long time. She scrolled all the way back to the earliest messages. Ethan, you're so beautiful. I can't stop thinking about you. Valerie, but you're married. This is wrong. Ethan, I know, but I'm unhappy in my marriage. She doesn't understand me. We've been strangers for a long time. Allison took a sharp, ragged breath. Unhappy. Strangers. So all this time, she had been living in a fantasy world, thinking they were just going through a rough patch, that things would get better, that they just needed to be patient. But he had already written her out of his life long ago. She put the phone down and wrapped her arms around herself. Her body was shaking, her teeth chattering, though it wasn't that cold in the kitchen. It was shock. She knew the symptoms. She'd seen them in patients countless times. Rapid breathing, chills, nausea. She needed to get a grip. Breathe deeper, slower. But she couldn't. The tears kept falling, and a black hole was growing inside her, sucking in everything. Hopes, plans, memories. The Ethan she had loved, the man she had known for 3 years, had been a fiction, an illusion. He had never existed. She didn't know how long she sat there. An hour, maybe more. Outside, the sky began to lighten. A gray dawn seeped through the clouds, promising an overcast day. Allison stood up, went to the sink, splashed cold water on her face, and looked at her reflection in the dark window pane. Red, swollen eyes, a pale face, damp hair. She returned to the table, picked up the phone, and opened the chat again. She reread the key phrases: "Get the money out of her," "File for divorce," "I'm over her," "She'll believe it," "She always does." Each word was a blow, but with each blow, the pain dulled, giving way to something else. Cold, hard, and resolute. He thought she was an idiot. A convenient, submissive fool who would work, bring home money, and believe his every word. A fool who wouldn't even guess that he was planning to leave with his mistress and his entire family, abandoning her, and then try to sue her for the condo she had bought with her own money, into which she had poured all her savings. Allison put the phone back on the table and leaned back in her chair. Through the fog of pain and betrayal, an idea began to form, clear and cold. He wanted to deceive her. Fine, but she was not going to be a victim. She wasn't going to cry and beg or start fights and demand explanations. She was going to do this differently. Allison took the phone and opened the travel app. She studied all the booking details, the confirmation number, the hotel information, the dates. It was all paid for with Ethan's card, but you could access the booking with the confirmation number and last name. She took screenshots, emailed them to herself, then deleted all traces, the chat history, the notifications. She put the phone back exactly where she'd found it. Ethan was still asleep, sprawled on his back with his mouth slightly open. Allison stood over him, looking at his face in the pre-dawn gloom, a stranger's face. She went back to the kitchen, got her own phone from her purse, and opened her contacts. She found the number for Rachel, a friend from nursing school. Rachel had later gone to law school and now worked at a law firm. They didn't see each other often, but they had stayed friends. It was too early to call. Allison sent a text. "Hey Rach, sorry it's so early. I need some legal advice, urgently. Can you meet today?" The reply came 20 minutes later, as Allison was sitting with a cup of coffee, staring out at the gray sky. "Hey, of course. Come by the office at 10. What happened? I'll tell you then. Thanks." Allison finished her coffee. Her hands were no longer shaking. The tears had dried. Inside, she felt empty and cold, like a freezer, but it was better than the pain that had been tearing her apart an hour ago. She stood up, went to the bathroom, washed her face, and pulled herself together. She looked in the mirror. Her face was pale, but her gaze was steady. She recognized herself again, the person who worked in the ER and made life-or-death decisions in seconds, who didn't panic and didn't break. Ethan woke up at 8, as usual. He stumbled into the kitchen, disheveled, in just his boxers, yawning and rubbing his eyes. "Morning," he mumbled, heading for the coffee maker. "Morning." Allison was sitting at the table with a cup of tea, scrolling through something on her phone. Her voice was even calm. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep." Ethan poured himself some coffee and sat down across from her. Allison didn't look up, continuing to stare at her screen as if reading something important. "Hey, about the vacation," he began, sipping from his mug. "I looked at some options. There's a great deal for Cancun, but the flight is on the 15th. Your time off starts on the 20th, right?" Allison raised her eyes and looked directly at him. He met her gaze without flinching. He lied so naturally, as if he'd been doing it his whole life. "Yeah, the 20th, she nodded. "Damn, so that won't work. Shame. It was a really good price. Well, I'll look for something else." "Okay." Allison went back to her phone. "I've got to get ready for work." She stood up, packed her bag, and got dressed. Ethan was finishing his coffee in the kitchen, scrolling through a feed on his phone. Allison paused in the hallway, looking at his back through the doorway. She used to love that back. She loved to hug him from behind when he stood at the stove. Now, it only filled her with disgust. "Bye," she said, and left without waiting for a reply. Allison arrived at Rachel's office at 9:45. It was on the 3rd floor of a downtown office building, glass doors, white walls, the smell of freshly brewed coffee from a machine in the lobby. The receptionist recognized her and nodded toward a door at the end of the hall. Rachel met her at the entrance to her office. She was tall and slender in a sharp gray suit, her hair pulled back in a tight bun. But her eyes were the same as always, warm, attentive, able to read a person's mood at a glance. "Allie, come in." She stepped aside to let her friend pass. "You look terrible. What's wrong?" Allison walked into the office and sat in a chair in front of a massive desk. Rachel closed the door, sat opposite her, and folded her hands, waiting. "Ethan's cheating on me," Allison said, the words catching in her throat. Saying it out loud was harder than just knowing it. "He's planning to file for divorce and wants to try and get part of the condo. And right now, he's planning to take his mistress and his whole family to Mexico on my money." Rachel sat up straighter. There was no surprise on her face, only the focused concentration of a professional who had just been given a case and was already formulating a strategy. "Tell me everything. Start from the beginning." Allison took out her phone and showed her the screenshots, the booking, the texts with Valerie. Rachel read in silence, occasionally pinching the screen to zoom in, sometimes scrolling back to reread something. Her expression remained impassive, though her lips tightened into a thin line every now and then. "Okay," she finally said, putting the phone down. "How long have you been married?" 3 years. "We got married in 2022. Whose name is the condo in?" "Mine. I bought it before the marriage. He's not even on the deed." "That's good. That means he has no claim to the property itself. It's premarital property. Any marital assets?" "His car is in his name, but we split the cost." "Fine. Let him take the car. Any joint savings accounts?" "I have my own savings, about $25,000, no joint accounts." Rachel nodded, jotting something in a notepad. "The money you gave him for the renovation and other things, how much was it, roughly?" "I didn't keep an exact count. Probably over 30,000. Were they bank transfers or cash?" "Both. Some transfers, some cash. We can trace the bank transfers. That will help if this goes to court, though getting it back is unlikely. He'll claim it was spent on shared living expenses. But you said he wants to split the condo. That's interesting." Rachel looked up from her notes. "Allison, listen carefully. The condo is your premarital property. He can only claim a portion of the value added during the marriage. Meaning, if you used joint funds for the renovation, he could try to sue for a part of the cost of that renovation. But not for the condo itself. We did the renovation, but it was mostly my money." "Can you prove it?" "I don't know. I probably have receipts somewhere." "Find them. Everything you can find, bring it to me. Contracts, receipts, bank statements. The more proof you have that the investment was yours, the better." Allison nodded, making a note on her phone. "Another question," Rachel continued. "Do you want a divorce?" "Yes. As fast as possible." "Okay. Here's how it works. An uncontested divorce, filed jointly, takes a couple of months, but he's unlikely to agree to that. If it's contested in court, it could take 6 months to a year, depending on the court's schedule. You should file first, before he has a chance. We'll file for divorce and division of assets. If there are disputes, the judge will schedule hearings." "Is there any way—" Allison hesitated, searching for the right words. "Is there a way to make him regret this?" Rachel smirked. "Revenge is a poor counselor, Allie, but I understand how you feel. What do you have in mind?" Allison was quiet. The hot, dark thing inside her was bubbling again. She remembered his texts. "Get the money out of her. She's over me. She'll believe it. She always does." He thought she was a weak, convenient fool he could use and discard. "They fly out on the 15th, she said slowly. "The whole group, his mom, his brother and sister-in-law, his mistress, to Mexico. It's all paid for. What if they don't end up in Cancun?" Rachel raised an eyebrow. "You want to change the reservation?" Yes, to something unpleasant. But so that, officially, the trip still happens. So they arrive, and, surprise, Rachel leaned back in her chair, thoughtfully tapping a pen against her desk. That's risky. If it comes out that you interfered, you could face legal trouble. Technically, it could be considered tampering with property, although, if you had legitimate access to the booking— I have his phone's password, Allison said, showing the screenshots. I have the booking number, all the details. I can log in as him and change it. And he wouldn't notice? Not if I do it at the last minute, a day or two before the flight. He's not going to be checking it every hour. Rachel was silent for a moment, thinking. Then she gave a slow nod. You know, officially, as your lawyer, I have to advise you against this. But as your friend? She grinned, and a hard glint appeared in her eyes. As your friend, I'll say this. If you're going to do it carefully. Leave no traces. And afterward, not a word to anyone. Not even me. Allison exhaled. A weight seemed to lift from her chest. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This isn't everything. You need to prepare for the divorce for real. Gather your documents, your proof of expenses, and most importantly, do not let him know that you know. Act normal until it's time. I understand. Rachel stood and walked to the window, looking down at the street below. Cars crawled through traffic. People hurried along the sidewalks. A normal weekday. Allie, I'm serious, she said without turning around. If you want revenge, that's your right, but don't regret it later. Vengeance leaves an aftertaste. It's not always pleasant. I won't regret it. Allison stood up, slinging her purse over her shoulder. I just want him to understand that I'm not the fool he took me for. Rachel turned, a sad smile on her face. Then, good luck, and call me when you're ready to file. I'll handle everything. Allison left the office and stood on the street for a moment, breathing in the cool air. She felt lighter. A plan was taking shape, clear and concrete. The next few days, she lived a strange double life. By day, she was at the hospital, changing dressings, starting IVs, giving injections, working her shifts. In the evening, she came home and pretended everything was normal. She had dinner with Ethan, talked about the weather, the news, trivial things. He didn't notice a thing, or pretended not to. At night, when he was asleep, Allison researched travel sites, looking at destinations, hotels, and rebooking options. She needed a place to send the whole crew instead of a Mexican beach resort. A place that was unpleasant, inconvenient, but still technically a hotel, a vacation package, so there could be no claims of fraud. She found the perfect option on the third day of searching. Not a popular coastal resort, but deep in the Mexican interior, a small, dusty town called San Ignacio, high in the mountains of Zacatecas, hundreds of miles from the nearest ocean. There was a guest house there. The photos showed a shabby, whitewashed building with a dirt yard. The description promised an authentic rural living experience and an introduction to traditional customs. In reality, it was the middle of nowhere. Buses from the nearest city only ran once a day, but officially, it was a registered tourist accommodation. You could book it. Allison planned every detail. She would change the booking 2 days before the flight, so Ethan wouldn't have time to fix it. She'd cancel the 5-star resort in Cancun and book the guest house in the mountain village. The flight would remain the same to Cancun. From there, they would have to take a 7-hour bus ride on winding mountain roads. Technically, it was possible. The travel app had a feature to modify bookings that worked automatically if you were within the allowed time frame. There was a change fee of about 20%, but that was a small price to pay. All that was left was getting into Ethan's account. She had memorized his password that night. It was simple, his mother's birthday. A classic. She tested it, logging in from a computer at the public library to leave no trace on her own devices. It worked. On the 13th, 2 days before the flight, Allison waited until nightfall. Ethan fell asleep, sprawled out as usual. She got up quietly, went to the kitchen, and opened her laptop. Her hands trembled as she typed in the password and logged into the travel agency account. The booking appeared on the screen. Cancun, Mexico, 5-star resort, 6 people. She clicked Modify Booking. The system offered several options. Allison chose change destination. She entered the new location, San Ignacio, Zacatecas, Mexico. She selected the guest house, El Refugio Montañés, the mountain refuge. She canceled the beachfront resort in Cancun. The screen flickered. Changes saved. A change fee has been charged to your card on file. A new booking confirmation has been sent to your email address. Allison closed the laptop and sat in the silence, listening to her own breathing. It was done. Now, all 6 of them would fly to Cancun as planned, but instead of a 5-star hotel on the beach, they would be met with a 7-hour bus ride into the mountain wilderness, to a village with no ocean, no beaches, and none of the luxury they were dreaming of. She pictured their faces. Ethan, so confident he was taking his mistress on a lavish getaway. His mother, who had probably already bragged to all her friends about the family trip to the Mexican Riviera. Valerie, packing a suitcase full of bikinis and sundresses. All of them, standing in the Cancun airport with their luggage, reading the new booking confirmation and realizing that what awaited them was nothing like the pictures. A small smile touched her lips. Let them find out what it feels like when everything goes wrong, when your expectations are shattered, when you realize you've been deceived. The next day, Allison started packing her own things. Not all at once, but little by little, so Ethan wouldn't notice. Documents, cash, important papers. She packed them in a bag she hid in her locker at work. Clothes, toiletries, personal items, everything that was precious to her. She called a real estate agent she knew and asked about rental options in a different state. The agent was surprised but didn't ask questions and sent her a few listings. Allison chose a small 1-bedroom apartment in a quiet suburban area, far from Chicago. "When are you planning to move in?" the agent asked. "On the 15th, Allison replied. The same day he was flying out, everything was falling into place. All she had to do was wait. On the evening of the 14th, Ethan was on edge, packing his suitcase, bustling around the apartment, checking his documents. Allison sat in the kitchen, pretending to read a book. "You're sure you can't get the time off?" he asked, poking his head in. His face wore a look of concern, but it was fake, theatrical. "I can't, Ethan. They won't let me go on such short notice, you know that." "Too bad. Well, we'll go together next time." Allison looked up at him, at the face she once loved, and felt nothing. Emptiness. A cold, calm emptiness. "Of course," she said. "Next time?" He left, satisfied. Allison returned to her book, but she wasn't reading. She was just staring at the words, thinking that tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, he would fly away and find out. On the morning of the 15th, Ethan woke up early, nervous and fidgety, double-checking his bags. Allison saw him to the door. "Have a safe flight," she said, kissing him on the cheek. "Thanks. I'll call you when we land." She nodded. He walked out, and the door clicked shut behind him. Allison stood in the entryway, listening as his footsteps faded down the hall. Then she went back to her room, grabbed her pre-packed bag, and took out her phone. She texted Rachel, "I'm ready to file. Let's meet the day after tomorrow." The reply came a minute later. "I'll be waiting. Stay strong." Allison ordered an Uber, loaded her things into the trunk, and got in the back seat. "Where to?" the driver asked. "Union Station." The car pulled away. Allison watched out the window as the houses, streets, and people of her old life flew by. Ahead lay something new, unknown, and frightening, but it was hers. She took out her phone and turned on the notifications. In a few hours, Ethan's flight would land. She wondered how long it would take him to realize something was wrong. A notification came at 1:30. A call from Ethan. Allison declined it. Then another, and another. She silenced her phone and put it in her bag. The train began to move, and the city skyline blurred behind her, dissolving into the haze. Allison leaned back in her seat and closed her eyes. For the first time in a long time, she felt at peace. The airport greeted Ethan and his group with its familiar hustle and bustle. Departure boards flickered, announcements echoed in 3 languages, and the smell of coffee hung in the air. Ethan walked ahead, pulling his suitcase. Behind him were his mother, Sharon, in a bright scarf. his brother, Mark, with his wife, Linda. Then Valerie, in white jeans and a pink jacket. And bringing up the rear was Mike, Mark's friend who had joined the trip at the last minute. So, almost time to board? Ethan turned to Valerie and winked. Ready for the best vacation of your life? She smiled, squeezing his hand. I can't wait. Sharon walked beside them, already flipping through a guidebook. Ethan, are you sure our hotel has a pool? And a buffet? Mom, it'll have everything. I told you, 5 stars, all-inclusive. Relax. They reached the check-in counter. Ethan handed their passports to the agent. She scanned them, nodded. Flight to Cancun. Looks good. Checking your bags? Yes. Ethan breathed a sigh of relief. They got through security without any issues and dropped off their luggage. Sharon was already looking at brochures for resorts. Valerie was taking selfies in front of the departure board. Everything was going according to plan. The flight to Cancun was smooth. 4 hours in the air, a little turbulence over the Gulf. Sharon dozed, Mark watched a movie, and Valerie held Ethan's hand, gazing dreamily out the window. When the plane landed and they stepped into the arrivals hall of Cancun International Airport, Ethan felt the warm, humid air and finally relaxed. At last, sun, sea, and relaxation. All right, should we call the shuttle? Mark asked, pulling out his phone. It should be included with the package. Ethan opened his own phone, pulling up the confirmation email from the travel agency, and he froze. He read the line again, then a third time. Accommodation. El Refugio Montañés Guest House. Village of San Ignacio, Zacatecas. Transportation. Public bus from Cancun Central Bus Terminal. Travel time, 7 hours. Departure, 5 p.m. What the? He scrolled further, not believing his eyes. Zacatecas? What the hell? Ethan, what is it? Sharon peered over his shoulder at the screen and read. Her face fell. Zacatecas? That's in the mountains. There's no ocean there. This has to be a mistake, Ethan said, frantically trying to refresh the app. I booked Cancun, the coast. 5 stars. Valerie snatched the phone from him and looked at the screen. She went pale. Ethan, it really says a mountain village. And there are pictures. She showed him the screen. It's some kind of shack. The photos showed a 2-story, whitewashed house with peeling paint, a dirt yard with chickens, and a wooden outhouse in the corner. Who could have changed the booking? Allison? But she didn't know his password. Or did she? He tried to remember if he'd ever given her access to his phone, ever told her the password. He couldn't recall. Ethan, what are we going to do now? Sharon came closer, her face red with indignation. I told everyone we were going to Cancun. And now what? Some village? This is humiliating. Mom, shut up and let me think, he snapped. She recoiled, hurt. Valerie tugged on his sleeve. Maybe we should just go? We can head to this village and figure it out from there. Did you see what kind of guest house that is? He shoved the phone in her face, showing her the pictures. It's a barn with an outhouse. Valerie looked and grimaced. Then let's just get a refund and go home. They won't give us a refund, Ethan said, pressing his temples. There's a cancellation fee. We'd lose almost everything, and we don't have the money to book a new trip. He pulled out his phone, opened his banking app, and checked his balance. It was nearly zero. Everything had gone into this trip, into gifts for Valerie, into the new phone he'd bought her last week. Allison had given him money for the renovation, for other needs. He had saved it, planned this, and now it was all ruined. All right, here's the deal, Mark said, putting a hand on his brother's shoulder. We either go to this village, or we stay here in Cancun and find another hotel with our own money. There's no third option. Personally, I say we just go. At least we'll be somewhere. In a mountain village with an outhouse? Sharon threw up her hands. So what, Mom? Did you have an indoor toilet when you were a kid? You managed, Mark retorted. They argued for another 10 minutes, right there in the arrivals hall. Ethan was silent, staring at the floor. One thought kept circling in his mind. Allison. It was her. No one else could have done it. But how? When? He remembered that night, falling asleep with his phone. He woke up, and it was on the nightstand. He hadn't thought anything of it, but what if she had taken it, looked through it, found out? A chill ran down his spine. If she knew, then she saw the texts with Valerie, the stuff about the money, the divorce, everything. He dialed her number. It rang and rang, then went to voicemail. He tried again. Same result. Damn it. He gripped his phone so hard his knuckles turned white. "Who are you calling?" Valerie asked. Her eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Doesn't matter." He walked away from the group and tried again. Straight to voicemail. "The subscriber you have called is not available." Panic began to rise in his chest. Allison was unreachable. The booking was changed. The money was gone. His entire plan was collapsing, and there was nothing he could do. "Fine, we're going," he muttered, returning to the group. Maybe it won't be that bad. But he didn't believe it himself. They found the bus to Zacatecas at the Cancun bus station. It was old and battered, with faded seats and cracked windows. The driver, an old man with a gray mustache, nodded indifferently as he tossed their suitcases into the luggage compartment. The journey took 7 hours. 7 torturous hours on a winding mountain road where the bus swayed on every turn, and the view outside was not of a turquoise sea, but of sun-scorched hillsides and dusty villages. Sharon complained the entire way. Linda was silent, staring at her phone whenever she could get a signal. Mark dozed against the window. Valerie sat next to Ethan, holding his hand, but he didn't respond. He just stared out the window, trying to comprehend how everything had gone so wrong, so fast. When the bus finally arrived in the city of Zacatecas, it was already dark. Ethan tried calling Allison again. No luck. He sent a text. "Call me. Urgent. Sent, but not delivered." From the bus station, they took a taxi to the village of San Ignacio, a beat-up sedan that barely fit all their luggage. The drive took another hour on a rough dirt road. The car shook violently over the bumps. Sharon groaned, clutching her purse. San Ignacio was even worse than the pictures. A couple dozen low-slung houses, dust everywhere, and the smell of livestock in the air. The Mountain Refuge guest house stood at the edge of the village. A 2-story whitewashed building with peeling paint on the shutters and a lopsided fence. The owner, an old man in a knitted vest who spoke broken English, met them at the gate. "Welcome. You are from Booking?" "Yes," Ethan managed through clenched teeth. "We are." Inside, it smelled of damp and something sour. The rooms were tiny, with metal frame beds and stacks of threadbare blankets. Sharon looked out into the yard and gasped. "Ethan, the toilet really is outside." Yes, the owner nodded eagerly. "Turkish toilet, very clean. I washed yesterday." Valerie sank onto a bed and buried her face in her hands. Ethan stood in the middle of the room, lost. Mark went outside to smoke. Linda was crying quietly in a corner. Mike was already on his phone, trying to figure out how to get out of there. Ethan took out his phone and dialed Allison's number one more time. Voicemail. He typed out a long, furious text, cursing her, accusing her, demanding an explanation. Sent, delivered, but not read. He went out into the yard and sat on a rickety bench next to his brother. "She knows," he said quietly. "Who?" "Allison. She found out everything. She changed the booking. She sent us here on purpose." Mark took a long drag from his cigarette, exhaling smoke into the warm night air. "Well, brother, you're screwed." Ethan was silent. One thought pounded in his head. How could he have been such an idiot? How could he have thought this would all go smoothly? His phone vibrated in his pocket. He snatched it out, hoping to see Allison's name, but it was a text from an unknown number. "Ethan, this is Rachel, Allison's friend and attorney. She asked me to pass along a message. She is filing for divorce tomorrow. The condo is her premarital property, as are her savings. You have no legal claim to them. Enjoy your vacation in the Mexican countryside." He reread the message 3 times, then threw the phone into the dust and buried his face in his hands. Allison stood by the window of her new apartment, holding a mug of tea. Outside, a light rain was falling. The city was gray and unfamiliar, but inside, she felt a sense of calm. She took out her phone and looked at the screen. 23 missed calls from Ethan. A dozen angry texts. She didn't read them. She just blocked his number and put the phone away. On the table lay the documents she would take to the courthouse tomorrow. The divorce petition, a list of assets, her financial statements. Rachel had prepared everything perfectly, quick, clean, and professional. Allison took a sip of tea, watching the rain. Somewhere out there, in the Mexican highlands, in a mountain village with no ocean and no beaches, Ethan and his companions were sitting in a shabby house, realizing their perfect vacation had turned into a nightmare. She pictured his face confused, angry, helpless, and felt nothing. Not triumph, not pity, just emptiness. Revenge was a cold dish. Rachel was right. It brought no satisfaction, but it brought no regret either. Allison finished her tea, placed the mug in the sink, and went to her room. Tomorrow, a new life would begin. Court, paperwork, formalities, then work, new people, new places. Maybe someday she would be able to trust someone again, to love someone for real, or maybe not. It didn't matter. Right now, only one thing mattered. She was free. She got into bed, pulled the covers up, and closed her eyes. Sleep came easily, without nightmares, without anxiety. And outside, the rain continued to fall, washing away everything old, everything unnecessary, everything that was past. And somewhere far away, in a remote Mexican village, Ethan sat on a creaky bed and understood that he had lost more than just a wife. He had lost the one person in the world who had believed in him completely, and that was something he could never get back.